Okay, well, thank you, Edward. I think that's a very good background to some of the things that I want to share with you this morning. My theme is also more and better jobs, and it really is about the challenges and some of the strengths and opportunities that I believe we have in our region that is going to enable us to rise to that challenge and to make sure that we have a thriving economy that is going to meet the needs of employers and businesses. I also want to focus a little bit on some of the issues that came out in relation to skills in the North East Independent Review, and then also to share with you some of the things that the North East LEP is doing in order to address the situations that we face. Clearly, the area that we live in and that we operate in, we have to have great ambitions for our businesses and for the young people who live in our areas, and that is clearly important. There clearly needs to be a very strong link between the skills, opportunities and the jobs that are available, and again, Edward has shared some of that information with us already. It's often very difficult to quantify and to define what skills are. And very often what we end up doing, and probably this is a good way to define it, is to use the terms qualification as a proxy for jobs. And this is really my starting point for this morning. Some of the challenges that I think that we have in our area is around the qualification profile that young people and adults hold. And if we look at, for example, the numbers of young people who hold 5 GCSEs A to C, and that includes English and Maths, employers are telling us that this is critically important. Although we have improved significantly over the last few years, we are now hitting 60.4%, but that is still below the top authority in the country, which is currently at 62.6%. We also use Ofsted very much as a proxy in terms of how we're doing as institutions. And again, if we look at our primary schools and the range of primary schools that have recently been judged outstanding, that does compare favourably. So we've got 20% of our primary schools in the North East LEP area performing at outstanding compared to 18% nationally. So that is a good position to be in, but obviously we need to drive that forward. The situation in relation to secondary schools is perhaps less good at the moment, and again, although improving, is currently at 19% compared to a position of 26% nationally. And if we again look at the numbers of young people who progress to higher education, that again is something that is going to be a challenge for us if we're going to hit the sorts of areas and the high performance that we're going to need to hit in the times ahead. And that is currently at 29%, or was between 2005 and 2009, compared to a national position of 34%. So clearly somewhere to go in relation to higher education progression. We also have a problem currently in terms of youth unemployment. We know that youth unemployment is an issue nationally, but what we're starting to see in the North East LEP area are issues about long-term unemployment for young people. And we know that when young people fall into a pattern of inactivity, it can lead to a range of other behaviours, and that will not do anything ultimately for our economy. Therefore, we do need to break some of those issues. Moving on then to perhaps some of the more positive notes in terms of what we have to build on, and we have got many strengths and many opportunities that we can build on. We have a number of internationally and nationally acclaimed universities in our area. They have a proven capacity of supporting businesses. We also have a very buoyant FE sector, of which I am a part. And obviously, as well as that, the number of private training providers that support businesses in our area. They have a track record of having great commitment to businesses. And again, because they come in under the scope of Ofsted, Many of them have high standards in terms of the grades that Ofsted have attributed. We also in the area have a good take-up and high success rates on our apprenticeships. There maybe are issues in terms of the numbers of apprentices that are aligned to the sort of areas that Edward has been talking to us about this morning, and that clearly is something that we need to address. And we also understand the need and the opportunities that will arrive and to be derived from the growth in manufacturing and engineering that we're going to see. But again, we need to stress that these have got to be linked to higher level skills, more importantly vocational education, higher increases in apprenticeships, particularly in relation to the STEM areas. And as providers, that is something that we will be focusing on. If we look at some of the things that came out in relation to skills in the North East Independent Review, and this is just a reminder of some of the points, and I'm sure many of you are already familiar with them. There is a recommendation there which I think is extremely important, and that is improving the standards in schools. We're already starting to see that happen. We need to carry on and we need to drive that. We also need to make sure that our information, advice and guidance that we give to young people in terms of the career opportunities that will be available to them in the future, we need to ensure that the message is getting out to them about the job opportunities and the level of remuneration that they can expect from particular careers as they approach them. In the recommendations was the opportunity and an encouragement for us to look at Schools Challenge. And again, we know that this is something that worked very successfully in London. We also know, however, that that was well funded. It won't be the case, unfortunately, in the North East. But I understand that many of our local authorities are working hard to use the resource that they've already got to make sure that Skill Challenge is actually a successful project in the North East and one that can drive up attainment. The other aspect which is critical and is important is the whole opportunity of Teach First opportunities. Teach First is a social enterprise. It's an opportunity for young graduates, particularly in the STEM areas, to go into schools as deliverers, as teachers, and during the 2 years they can pick up their teacher qualification. And again, those schools that take that opportunity have demonstrated the real advantages that this can bring in terms of raising the aspirations of youngsters in schools and helping to align the information, advice and guidance to the opportunities that are available in the labour market. The other aspect that Adonis mentioned in the report was the opportunities and the advantages that school governors bring to the aspirations of a school. And we do know and we understand that in those schools that are perhaps in better social areas where they have a strong governing body, their aspirations for their young people are higher, their performance is likely to be higher. What we need to encourage, particularly from the business community, is the opportunities that might arise in terms of giving something back to those schools that perhaps in in more disadvantaged areas, and giving time to those governing bodies so that once again through that debate and discussion we can drive up the career opportunities and the aspirations of those young people who very often don't have the role models that they need within either the families or in the communities in which they live. We know that we do need to double the number of youth on apprentices. We've had significant successes in terms of apprentices generally, but very often it has been the adult apprentices, and we need to do more in terms of driving up that youth unemployment, driving up youth apprentices and obviously countering the unemployment figures that we're starting to see in that age group of 19 to 24-year-olds. And of course, we need to make sure that that is aligned to the whole issue of the growth sectors that Ed has shared with us this morning. And for that, we do need to make sure that we have got employers like yourselves on board to help us to attain those particular targets. The independent review also mentioned the opportunity of introducing a co-commissioning model which will incentivise training providers. And I want to say a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. Okay, then in terms of the North East LEP and what we are doing in terms of supporting the whole issue of the skills agenda. Well, clearly, skills is going to feature very, very heavily in terms of the strategic economic plan that is currently being developed. And I know that many of you are within the working groups that are helping to develop particular aspects of it. We also know that from January 2014, we will see a further round of European structural funding, and the LEP will be driving the projects and approving projects that's going to be successful. And once again, in addition to supporting European priorities, which clearly we will need to do, we will also be using this resource to help with our skills development. I mentioned earlier about the skills incentive pilot. We are one of 3 LEP areas in the country that is going forward with this pilot scheme. There will be some challenges associated with it, and certainly as providers, we are very keen to support this pilot in any way we can, because it is in our interest to ensure that the provision that we put on for both young people, adults, and for workforce development is supporting our economy. There are a couple of challenges that perhaps are worth mentioning this morning. And that is, the first one is probably associated with this whole issue of supply and demand. And very often as providers, we find that the demand will come from the learners. And therefore it is very difficult for us to turn our backs on what learners need to simply say it doesn't fit in with the needs of the economy and therefore we can't do it. So it is getting some level of balance associated with that. And I think the second thing to mention is that more and more resource for learning and for training does need to come from either the learners themselves or from the employers. So very often we don't have that level of traction over what we provide. And it really is about working through some of these issues and hoping that we will ultimately, as providers, ensure that what we offer and what we encourage our learners to participate in is actually supporting the local economy. That really brings me to the end of my presentation, and I would thank you for listening, but also to say that, again, as has been said already by Paul and by Edward, it is critically important that if we are going to move forward and we're going to drive economic regeneration and the rebalancing of the economy, it is important that businesses and providers worked actively together to ensure that that is successful. And given the responses that I think we've seen to date through a number of initiatives, we're starting to see that happen, and I would encourage you to continue that journey and to continue those discussions, because I believe it can be done. Thank you.